Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight, our feature is Robert Sallee, who died recently at the age of 82, and he was the last survivor of the 1949 Montana Mann Gulch fire. Fire, which occurred on August 5, 1949, took the lives of 13 firefighters. 3 other young firefighters survived, and Mr. Sully was the last survivor to die. The story of the smoke jumpers was immortalized in the 1992 bestseller Young Men and Fire by Norman Maclean. Here's a Forest Service report on the 1949 Mann Gulch fire, and you will hear within the report how Mr. Sully managed to survive.
August 5th, 1949. It's a broiling hot day across Montana. The thermometer in Helena reads 97 degrees, but it's even hotter in Mann Gulch, a funnel-shaped canyon that adjoins the Missouri River 20 miles north of Helena. It's been a busy fire season, and the Young Smoke Jumper program is getting a good test. 1949 is the 9th year young men in prime physical condition have risked life and limb to attack wildfires in the national forests of Montana. The program has been remarkably successful. The smoke jumpers have proven the value of quickly getting to remote, roadless areas to attack fires in the early stages. In the afternoon of August 5th, a fire is reported on the south ridge of Mann Gulch, and 16 smoke jumpers take off from Missoula and fly 120 miles east to the jump site. One smoke jumper becomes ill on the bumpy flight and remains on the airplane. The remaining 15 jumpers hook onto the jump line and hurl themselves into the wrath of nature.
At about 3:10 p.m., the airplane arrives over the fire area. Earl Cooley, the spotter, and Foreman Wag Dodge are in the door of the DC-3, scanning the area for a suitable jump spot. They circle, they drop a drift streamer. It drifts about a quarter mile down the canyon. They carry the jumpers a quarter mile into the wind and have them exit the airplane. At 3:30, Wag Dodge, followed by 3 jumpers, take off out of the airplane and land here. 3 more passes, and the rest of the 15 jumpers are on the ground. They assemble their parachutes and their jump gear. The next step is to gather the cargo. Since the winds are so turbulent in the canyon, it's impossible for the airplane to drop down low and accurately drop the cargo in a concentrated area, so they have to drop from a high altitude. The cargo is scattered down the canyon about a quarter mile. Well, now it's about 4 o'clock, and the jumpers and all the cargo are on the ground. Since the airplane had to drop the cargo at a high altitude, it's fairly scattered throughout the bottom of the gulch. The foreman tells his men to gather up all the cargo. He, in the meantime, is planning to take off and head over toward the fire because he's heard someone yelling. The rest of the crew takes about 45 minutes to gather all the cargo up. Then they grab a bite to eat, fill their canteens, and then each man grabs double tools, Pulaski and shovel. 2 of the men grab saws. After about 20 minutes, they too head toward the fire. Once Foreman Dodge left the cargo assembly point, he headed up to the fire. He arrived at the fire's edge about 5 o'clock and found James Harrison. James was a wilderness guard on the Helena National Forest, and he'd been working on the fire for several hours by himself. Dodge didn't like what he saw up there, so he and Harrison headed out back down toward the cargo assembly point. It was there they picked up a little bit of food and water and continued to chase the crew down the canyon, where it took them about 20 minutes. Finally, when they caught up with the crew, Dodge ordered Bill Hellman, squad leader, to the back of the line, and Dodge took over the lead. Foreman Dodge could see that the fire had now jumped from the top of the ridge, from the Meriwether side of the canyon, to the north slope of Mann Gulch. So the fire was now burning up both sides of the gulch at the crew. Dodge realized he had to turn his men around and move quickly up toward the ridge top and get out. At some point, and there's some speculation here, some say maybe 500 yards, some say as little as 200 yards, the foreman ordered his men to drop all their heavy tools. About half the men did, and half the men didn't. From that point, the men had a race for their lives. Now we're at the crossroads between life and death. This is the point where Dodge started his escape fire. After leaving the drop tool point and traveling at top speed, the men reached this point, and Dodge turned and looked down the canyon. Below him, he could see the fire was moving very fast, catching up with them, leaving them about a minute before they would overtake him. So Dodge calmly reaches into his pocket, pulls out matches, and starts lighting the grass on the hillside above him on fire. The men are confused by this. They don't know what he's trying to accomplish. He's putting fire above the men on the hill, when below them they have more fire than they can deal with. Dodge then stands up and motions to the men, "Follow me, men. In here, boys. Follow me." But the men are confused amid the heat, the smoke, and the flame, and they continue on. One of the men was overheard saying, "To hell with that. I'm getting out of here." Dodge finally has to give up his pleas to get the men into the escape fire, and he walks into the burn area. He wets a handkerchief, covers his face, and lays down and waits for the flames to move up onto his area. The rest of the men head up the hill. Only 2 outran the fire. Dodge stood up about 10 minutes later and started looking for his men. After running up the right flank of Dodge's escape fire, Rumsey and Sallee, followed closely by Eldon Dietert, reach the top of the ridge, and it's there they find a very small opening along this ridge line, and they sneak through, just in the nick of time. Eldon Dieter, for some reason, continues on and chooses not to go through the opening. Sully and Rumsey run down the hill to a scree slope, and it's in this rock slide that they take refuge as the fire comes at them from both below and the top. They move across the rock slide, avoiding the heat, and once the flames battle down, they stand up and start back up for the ridgetop.
The Mann Gulch fire was a harsh wake-up call for just how unpredictable fire can be. The conditions in Mann Gulch changed quickly and resulted in 16 firefighters racing a fire up a brutally steep slope, a race 13 men would lose.
Robert J. Bennett, Eldon E. Dieter, James O. Harrison, William J. Hellman, Philip R. McVeigh, David R. Navon, Leonard L. Piper, Stanley J. Reba, Marvin L. Sherman, Joseph B. Sylvia, Henry J. Thal, Jr., Newton R. Thompson, and Silas R. Thompson.
The unusual fire behavior in Mann Gulch created a new interest in fire research, and the field of fire science was born. Out of this, 2 Forest Service Fire Sciences laboratories were created, one of which is located in Missoula, Montana. Along with research came technology that has produced better tools for firefighters, such as fire shelters, fire-resistant clothing, and better communications equipment. But most important is the need to understand the various elements that drive a wildfire. From this knowledge, we can better understand that nature is not always as predictable as we would like. However, the ultimate legacy of Mann Gulch is the loss of the young men who fell here. Because they died so young, that is why it is so important that they be remembered.
And the lesson their deaths taught us, that wildfires are and always will be dangerous.
We're going to move on now to Malcolm Glazer, who died recently at the age of 86. And Malcolm Glazer was the owner of 2 of sports' most successful franchises, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with whom he won the 2003 Super Bowl, and Manchester United, which was the most valuable franchise in the world until it was recently surpassed by Real Madrid. It's worth a little over $3 billion. Here is Matthew Bannister, the BBC4's last word to talk about Malcolm Glazer and his franchises.
Malcolm Glazer was the American businessman behind 2 very different but successful football clubs.
Wembley, Barcelona, Moscow, Manchester United, 3 times European champions.
Malcolm Glazer's investments guided the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to Super Bowl glory, and his ownership of Manchester United coincided with their victory in the European Cup final. But the supporters' attitude to this self-made billionaire on either side of the Atlantic is very different. I'm joined from Florida now by John Romano of the Tampa Bay Times and by the BBC's Manchester United reporter Bill Rice. John, we'll start with you. I wonder if you can fill us in on Malcolm Glazer's background and how he made his fortune.
Well, he was very much a self-made man. He took over his father's watch repair business when his father passed away. Malcolm was 15 years old. In very short order, he worked hard enough to build up some savings, and he started investing his money. I don't think there is any one business that you can point to say where he made his fortune. He was just very shrewd when it came to picking out businesses that may have been undervalued and had room to grow. He ended up buying restaurants, trailer parks, retail businesses, television stations. Anywhere he saw a chance to make money, he would invest, and that's the attitude that he took when he bought the Buccaneers. He had been trying to buy an American football team for quite some time before he got the Buccaneers, and I think what he saw was there was just a tremendous opportunity for revenue in American football. The sport was growing by leaps and bounds 20 years ago. He bought the Buccaneers at a time that it was a very high price. It was $192 million, which was the highest price paid for a team at that point. But the team now is worth 3-4 times as much as that. They were probably the worst team in the NFL. They were on their way to leave town. There were investors that wanted to move the team to another state, and Glazer bought it and swore that he would keep the team here, which made him a hero to a lot of people, but then he quickly turned around and demanded that the city build him a new stadium, which put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. But it ended up being a good investment for the city and certainly a good investment for him.
Well, let's talk then about the Manchester United investment. Bill Rice is on the line from Manchester. Bill, when Malcolm Glazer started buying shares in Manchester United, how did the supporters react?
The concern almost immediately from Manchester United supporters was what Malcolm Glazer's intentions were for Manchester United when he started buying up shares between 2003 and 2005 before his eventual takeover of the club, because this is a man who had no history in football, had never been to Manchester, and in fact never visited the club, even as owner of Manchester United. It was seen purely as a way for him and the Glazer family to make money. Manchester United were referred to as a brand and a franchise, which are phrases that don't go down particularly well with football fans. And it was the method of the Glazer takeover which particularly upset the supporters. Obviously, when the Glazer family took over Manchester United, the takeover was funded by loans secured against the club's assets, which plunged the club into debts which they're still paying today. The estimates are that £700 million have gone out of Manchester United to service that debt, and the club still owes around £400 million. So you can understand why supporters would rather have seen that money invested in the team than to pay off club's debts.
And it seems as though, unlike a lot of other very rich people who've invested in English football, Malcolm Glazer simply saw it as a business opportunity. He didn't see it as an ego boost or as a trophy.
No, I think we've seen with owners like Roman Abramovich at Chelsea that football is effectively a plaything for some of these billionaires. But the increase of American owners in the Premier League over the last 10 years has come from the global appeal of the Premier League. Unlike American sports like the NFL, the Premier League is now viewed worldwide, and the TV revenue that comes into the clubs is astronomical. And I think any smart businessman would see that as an opportunity to make money. The concern for the Manchester United supporters, although the club has remained successful on the pitch, at least until recently, is that the Glazers were using the club to service their own debt rather than for the good of Manchester United.
So perhaps, John Romano, he'll be more mourned in Tampa Bay than in Manchester.
I think people around here that have been around for a long time and remember that he sort of rescued the franchise when it was about to leave, and remember that he turned the franchise around and won a Super Bowl, they do have fond memories. But it's interesting because once the Glazers bought Manchester United, they stopped putting as much money into the Buccaneers, and the last 10 years have not been nearly as successful around here, and there are a lot of people who are unhappy with the Glazers for that reason.
We're going to close tonight with Herb Jeffries, who died recently at the age of 100. He was the bronze buckaroo. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, he was the black cowboy singing star, sort of the black Gene Autry. The only thing is, he may not have been black. Here's a little bit of his story.
I didn't set out to make history, but that's exactly what happened.
He was cinema's original black hero, changing the face of the singing cowboy forever.
All children should have heroes to look up to.
He was discovered by Louis Armstrong and toured with greats like Duke Ellington. He opened doors for generations of African-American performers.
It's the bronze buckaroo, man.
But what you don't know about Herb Jeffries may shock you.
My mother was Irish and my father was Sicilian.
He was considered a shade too dark for the white bands and a shade too light for the black band.
So I said, I'm a Creole from New Orleans.
Herb Jeffries, unabashedly, was a creation of Hollywood.
I'm going to play a part. Darken me up.
Little makeup, little Max Factor Egyptian bronze.
And he bought it.
He had to establish himself as a black singer.
I expected him to be a black man, really black, but he looked more Mexican or something like that.
No one ever accused Herb Jeffries of being black.
I have a right to do the pictures I did and call myself a colored performer, because that's what I am. Feels good when I walk down the street.
Here he is singing with the Duke Ellington Band.
Fare thee well, land of cotton, cotton, Lyle is out of style. Honey child, jump for joy. Don't you grieve, little Eve. All the hounds I do believe have been killed. Ain't you thrilled? Jump for joy.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer, Sid Tepps. In the early 1940s, Herb Jeffries recorded a jazz classic with Duke Ellington. It became a bestseller. It's called Flamingo.
Flamingo, like a flame in the sky, flying over the island to my lover nearby. Flamingo, with your tropical hue, for it's you I rely on, and the love that is true.